Everyone, talofa lava to our Samoan Language Day. And we have apologies, and we have noted apologies previously. We're not going to record it, but again, I'll just reiterate what the Mayor said. Councillor Simpson not speaking today is not based on the fact that she's boycotting us or anything. It's just doctor's orders, so she has an out for today.
I'm here.
Yeah. And I'm not going to do anything, but I do want to just comment very briefly, because I didn't about Dick before, just say it's almost not the same to have an LTP or an annual plan without Dick, with his usually very good contribution. Feisty often, and probably different, but it was always good to get that well thought out and feisty contribution. So I'll just note that in passing, because it was always another voice that was always we wanted to hear, another point of view. Right, there are no petitions, sorry, no declarations of interest.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Can I just talk to that for a second? I've got a concern, and it concerns me that we received some emails last night. We received a lot of emails in the last 24 hours, but in particular, 2 came through last night with regard to the Puki Tapapa local board's M1 local initiative, and that's Liston Village. And I used to be on the James Wallace Arts Centre governance group, and I came off of that because I wanted to lobby or advocate for the Liston Village for Puki Tapapa. And I'm aware that you took my place, and I don't see a declaration of interest on that. And I wonder if you would like to declare that so that you don't take part in the vote on the Puki Tapapa. Because I think that the emails last night are opening up some kind of controversy, and I've no idea why they arrived. I've no idea. I understand that you must have approved them. They came from Councillor Fletcher, or via Councillor Fletcher, but I'm really concerned, so I would quite like it if you would...
Yep, no, that's a good point. Sorry, I hadn't thought about that, so I will declare a declaration of interest
fantastic.
on any discussion to do with the
Mr. Chair, I'm just concerned because I've seen this happen before, and I'd really like if we could check this with our democracy advisors, is that if you are appointed by the council, it's a different judgment call on that, or a different parameter. I'm just not sure, because that would be then difficult for, quite a few different things we need to vote for if we're actually appointed by the council, as opposed to being there in our own personal right.
I understand that, but given what Councillor has brought that up, I suppose I've been fairly proactive in the background as well, outside those meetings. So I will declare an interest in that matter.
Mr. Chairman,
Councillor Fletcher.
Mr. Chairman, speaking to the point of order, yes, I did request information. I did not do it through you. I did it directly with officers. But while we're on the issue of conflict, I wish to table again the conflicts that I have consistently repeated to you. So I just want to make sure that they're recorded. Thank you.
All right. Any further declarations? No? Okay. Right. No petitions. There is no public input. There is no local board input, but I appreciate that there are several local boards here being represented. Thank you for coming and showing the interest. There's no extraordinary business. There are no notices of motion. And we then get to item number 8, which is the local board feedback. So I will happy to move this, and Councillor Simpson will second, but then we're noting I have a conflict on the feedback from Puki Tapapa on one. Yep. No, actually not on this one. That's actually the Ollies I would declare. So we have a move and a second. Right, we'll ask for. We have the team up there. Welcome.
Good morning, Chair and Councillors. I have Rachel Wilson and Adam Molina from our team here today as well. So this report basically summarise the feedback and advocacy from local boards on the 10-year budget following the consultation that happened earlier this year. All local boards have now considered community feedback received for their local area and resolved on this feedback for the 10-year budget for the consideration of the governing body. You'll see in the report it summarises common themes. It does not include all of the matters that are raised in the local board resolutions, so we've attached those for your consideration as well as a complete list of the local board advocacy priorities in attachment A. The resolutions are in attachment B. The key themes arising from those local board resolutions on regional issues in the 10-year budget include support for a regional fuel tax, support for a water quality targeted rate and a natural environment targeted rate, the latter at the higher average rate of $47 per year per residential ratepayer, support for a rates increase of 2.5% for the first 2 years and 3.5% for years 3 to 10. Support for online accommodation providers that meet particular thresholds, and lastly that the council-controlled organisation accountability policy should include engagement and relationships with local boards, and also that they should require council-controlled organisation to give effect to local board plans. Now, obviously, there are a number of qualifications, as you'll see in the resolutions and in the body of the report. Both the boards that have resolved in support or against or with those qualifications are detailed, and we're certainly happy to answer questions on that. Generally, the advocacy issues and key advocacy projects raised by the local boards really were responding to Auckland's future challenges, and some of the key themes there, just to quickly highlight, around the need for integrated transport infrastructure to support growth and development, the provision of community facilities, and lastly addressing environmental concerns. We're very happy to answer any questions of detail. Thank you.
Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Look, I just want to check something. There's been some great feedback here from local boards. What I wanted to check, I can see one of the two boards I represent has given feedback under the OLLI, the project there, and that's on page 21. Recently I attended a meeting, as did Councillor Casey and Councillor Filipaina, where it was suggested that the councillors are not listening to the community, but I want to just check. When I go over to page 25, on other advocacy items, is that a correct record that the Devonport Takapuna Local Board recorded no further advocacy items for the community when measured against the enthusiasm expressed from other boards? It looks like a typo. Is that accurate?
Yes, in fact, I believe that is accurate, Councillor Darby.
Wow.
Right, well, there's no further questions. Any comment? Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Just looking at the Rodney local boards feedback and their support for the regional fuel tax, along with their key project, which is the sealing of Rodney roads, 121 million. I'd probably just would add to that's a good start. It's a good start for Rodney, but it probably needs more going forward after a lot of underinvestment after many years. I certainly wouldn't want to see Rodney being bullied or threatened that projects would be withdrawn just because we had alternative ideas about how projects should be funded. And I wouldn't want to see making good on threats. If Rodney doesn't toe the party line, they will miss out on its desperately needed projects. Thank you.
No, I think we're beyond and above that, Councillor Sayers, so I don't think that's really going to happen, and I'm not aware that that's been insinuated or in any way given as some sort of message. So we have Councillor Casey.
Yeah, through the chair, it's with regard to page 25, the Albert Eden advocacy on an aquatic facility for Mount Albert. As you know, the Mount Albert pool is in decline, and it's only got about another 8 to 10 years. And it's my understanding that the council has made a commitment to retaining the pool in Mount Albert. It's just that nobody has said it out loud. And right now there is a website, Mount Albert Inc., who's saying that the Mount Albert pool's not in the budget, therefore we've lost it. So I need somebody to put the record right, and I'm happy if you do it on camera, because I still haven't seen anything written down. And if need be, I'll move an amendment to the Mayor's proposal so that there is a statement in there that says there is a commitment to retaining the Mount Albert pool, because that's what I'm hearing, but I need to hear it out loud or see it in writing, and soon.
So after our workshop where we did have a discussion about that, I got the impression that the staff officer was going to deal with that. Nothing's happened?
Nothing's happened yet. But here's an ideal opportunity. The world is looking in.
Well, it was Liz. Is Liz in the room? No?
Liz haven't listened to the room, but I can speak on the social policy's behalf.
Welcome up, Lisa.
Hi. The staff, as a result of the last committee workshop, staff have been working with the media team to prepare something about Mount Albert. I saw a draft of it last night, and it should be coming through to key people today for release, that just gave the context of Mount Albert, the work that is being done, and advising where it is in terms of the network, and it's reconfirming the need for a pool or aquatic access in that area. So it is being prepared, and we'll make sure you see it.
Great, thank you.
Right. Right. Councillor Hills.
It's just a question, and due to Councillor Sayers' comment on the Rodney Local Board, are the Rodney Local Board presenting about that today at all, or they're not?
First thing is, I'm just going to be quite strict about questions first, and then, then comments. So we're on to comment, but you're asking a question in relation. It's brought up from a comment, so I'll be flexible. The Rodney Local Board, I don't think they were going to present later when we actually get to vote on that, but I notice Phelan is here.
Oh, right.
But yeah,
That's
it
fine.
wasn't an intention to present. All right, well, there's no further comment, councillors. I will put the motion, so we've got to move in a seconder. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. All passed. Right, thank you, Louise, Rachel and Adam. We now move to the Merrill proposal, and I think we have a mover in...
I'll move that.
And I will second that. So we have a mover and a seconder, and we invite the Mayor to speak. But Michael, Ross, Andrew, welcome.
Particular amendment.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And while this is called the mayoral proposal, let's be honest about that. No proposal of this nature is the product of one person. It's the product of a big team effort. And I want to acknowledge, first of all, the officials and the hard work they've put into it. I think I've been incredibly well serviced by the finance area and by staff in my own office. And actually, I want to thank everybody around this table and the local boards, because this proposal comes out of actually dozens of meetings that we have had collectively to talk through these issues. So acknowledge councillors, acknowledge members of the Independent Maori Statutory Board, and thank you for the input that you've put into it. There's a couple of things that I just want to say that I think are critical themes for this proposal. The first is, what sort of difference are we going to make with this 10-year plan? And I don't know, is there anybody here that is elected or appointed to this group that came to council not to make a difference, not to be transformative in terms of the sort of Auckland we have a vision for 10 years out and what we want to do with it? And I think the answer to that is no. We all come here motivated to create a better city, a world-class city, a city that's vibrant, interesting, exciting and inclusive, all of those things. And where I think this budget proposal that we have collectively worked on is transformative is in the three key areas of transport, water and housing. I don't know what speech I would have given if Council had voted down the proposal for a regional fuel tax, because I wouldn't have been making that claim. We would have been stand still, do nothing, watch as the city deteriorated around us. But I think we can say now that with 28 billion going into our transport system in the next 10 years, plus the 4 billion that the government is putting in separately on light rail, we're going to make a huge difference to our city. And we have to do that. We know why we have to do it. The city is congested. You know, it's not just the growth in population, but I was at a tourist event yesterday, and the number of tourists coming through Auckland is going to double, and so is the revenue. The revenue is going up to $16 billion a year for tourist expenditure in Auckland. And if we don't have the facilities, our life quality as Aucklanders diminishes, our environment goes down the gurgler, but we cease to be such an attractive place to visit and to study. So what we've done in transport is really important, particularly in public transport, road safety and congestion, and walking and cycling. But I also want to acknowledge in this package the changes that we will make in the quality of our water. We love our beaches in Auckland. Ever since I was a kid, I grew up every Christmas, we were down at the beach. That was part of our birthright as Aucklanders. And when we got those safe swim results in, I know that Councillor Holst and I looked at them and thought, gee, this is appalling. This is worse than we thought. And then we said to each other, hey, this is important because we are showing Aucklanders what the state of our water quality is, and we've really got to do something about that. So take a crisis and turn it into an opportunity. We are going to clean up our beaches and our waterways in 10 years when the last long-term plan envisaged that it would be 30 years. And that's important, I know, to the Independent Māori Statutory Board. It's important to all of us. That is our birthright, and we need to do it. And Aucklanders have got in behind us by a margin of 2 to 1 and said, yep, we want you to keep the average general rates low and reasonable, but yes, we are prepared to pay money to clean up our beaches and our waterways. How can we be a world-class city when every time it rains, our wastewater discharges into our harbours? We can't be. So I welcome that. I welcome the fact that we now have, between the targeted rate and the extra money Watercare is putting in, another $850 million to fix our ageing infrastructure, to stop the wastewater overflows, and to improve the general nature of our waterways, and including things like septic tanks. So that's important, but the other stuff we're doing in this proposal on the environment is equally important. The targeted rate on protecting our natural heritage. Fantastic. Can we sit here and do nothing while our iconic kauri tree suffers from dieback disease and could be wiped out in our lifetime, our kids never having the opportunity, or our grandkids, as the case may be, to see what we've enjoyed? Can we really sit back while the pests across Auckland, particularly opossums and rats, ran rampant, and our native bird life is just decimated? Is that the heritage we want to leave to our city and our region? Of course it's not. And I really welcome the fact that Auckland has again said, yes, we're prepared to pay that money, get on and fix the problem. Because that's what we are here to do, to fix problems, to make our city better. And I want to raise just a couple of other things on the environment, because I think it is a theme of this proposal. We've put money aside for climate change, $40 million. I don't think that will be the last figure we see. This will be the defining economic and environmental issue of our time, and we'll need to keep doing more. And I know some of my colleagues around this table are passionate about that. Coastal management, another 90 million, and that's linked to climate change, the damage that's being done, making sure that we repair that damage and prepare for the future. And the last thing in the environment that I just want to touch on is that money that in this proposal that we put into the reserves. The reserves at Aoraki, at Parakai, the Monga. These are things that are fantastic for our city, thanks to those in the past that set aside those reserves. Thanks for the hard work put in by Mana Whenua into preserving the Monga, but more than preserving it, let's go out and enhance it. So transport and water, I think, and the environment generally, I think we're seeing some transformative changes. Those two things together enable us to be transformative on housing, the other big challenge that we've got. What is one of the biggest problems in getting more housing, both brownfields intensification, which I think we should be emphasising, and greenfields? If we don't provide the infrastructure by way of transport and by way of freshwater, stormwater and wastewater, we can't build the houses to deal with our affordability and housing shortage crisis. So, you know, thanks again for those that supported the regional fuel tax, because we can do things in transport that will enable those developments to go ahead. The emphasis of this budget is on infrastructure, and you all know why. If we're growing, we're adding another city the size of Tauranga to us every 3 years, we've got to have that infrastructure in place. But a city and a community does not exist solely on the basis of infrastructure. We want this city of ours to be vibrant, interesting and inclusive, and there are a couple of highlights that I want to focus on in what this proposal involves. And I'm not claiming credit for this, I think this is a collective credit for people around the table. The Sports and Culture Fund, $120 million as a contestable fund. We know how important sport is to the life of our community, and particularly our young people, and to our health. This enables us to make some real inroads in some long-standing problems there. The Art Gallery, I won't start naming councillors around the table that with me said we cannot keep cutting funding for an iconic institution like the Art Gallery. There's a whole lot of you that contributed to that, and thank you for it. But this puts another 20 million back into our art gallery. The zoo, you know, it's great having grandkids. You've got an excuse to go back to the zoo. I hadn't done it since my own kids were little. But the infrastructure there is ancient. It's falling apart, and we need to make that investment. Auckland City Mission, I want to touch on that. Councillor Casey, I know, shares my absolute enthusiasm for the work they do on the homeless. What we've done here is important, but it's symbolic. It's to give the Auckland City Mission in the redevelopment of their site, so that they're going to accommodate, I think it's 200 people on site there, to effectively return the development contribution and the resource and the building consent costs. Should we do more? I'd love to do more, but I've been in discussion in the last few days, weeks and months with the private sector. And I say to the private sector, there's some good people out there, big business, step forward, put the money down, do something to help the nature of our city, and I'm getting really positive responses. So I don't want to create the impression that the government's putting a lot of money in, that just leave it to the government and the council, they'll take care of it. I say this is also a shared corporate responsibility, and I'm looking forward to the assistance they can give to realising the goal of the Auckland City Mission. There are groups that serve Auckland, like Surf Lifesaving, the Northern Region, and the Auckland Marine Rescue Centre that we're putting capital into. I think that's critically important. Been a bit of debate in the media about swimming pools, and a bit more today. Howick, the Faux, Henderson Massey, they're simply where they're located, but these are regional facilities. They serve a wider area. And I'm sure we're not going to see a collapse of the Mount Albert facility either. But we're investing some serious money in those areas as regional assets. We're looking to help the community, and I want to acknowledge and thank the local boards who have been incredibly constructive in putting forward what they think are the single most important initiatives for their areas, and likewise to the Independent Māori Statutory Board. Really responsible in saying, okay, we could spend this much money, we know you don't have it, this is how much we need, but we need to invest this to make sure that the outcomes in our city are beneficial to everyone and not only part of the city. So I think that's important. That's the expenditure side. The other side of it is revenue. And there is one responsibility that we have that is even more important than transforming the city, and that is to exercise prudent fiscal management of the city. Because if we don't do that, actually we're not going to achieve the wider goals of transformation. And we have kept within our debt to revenue ratio in a very testing time. We're putting more money into interest, we're putting more money into depreciation, we're buying and building more and more assets. But if you look at the chart in this paper, you will see that we are close to the line. We've created a threshold below the 270% debt to revenue ratio that Standard & Poor's sets for us to maintain our credit rating. We've brought it down to 265 and we don't go above that. But it is critically important that we continue not to go above that. And I know that there'll be a range of other proposals today to spend more money. There's a couple there that you've been kind enough to send to me that I think we can accommodate. They're not large sums of money. Councillor Bartley and Councillor Fletcher, I think, have been among those that have, and Councillor Darby, that have raised some areas where we could just be a little bit more specific and more generous, and I think we can accommodate that. But by and large, it's really important that we maintain that fiscal rectitude. What I'm proud of in this budget is that we have kept our general rate level, our general rate average rate increases at a low and reasonable amount of 2.5% for the next 2 years. That, of course, comes with the targeted rates, which Aucklanders have given their mandate for us to spend, and it comes together with the regional fuel tax, which enables us to be far more radical in how we tackle the transport crisis in Auckland. But to do what we've done while keeping rates low is partly a reflection of the collective decisions we've made, such as the savings from amalgamation. If we're 40% over in our floor space for our corporate functions and staffing, then we need to cut that back and we need to make the savings where we can, and we've agreed to do that. We've done the Section 17A reviews and we've identified 374 million, I think, that is likely that we can save, not by cutting services, but by doing things more effectively, and that is money available to reinvest in other big priorities that we've got in our area. I want to finish on two specific issues that have attracted some controversy. The first is extending the business rating, and I want to focus on this first, the business rating for online accommodation. Every hotel and motel pays business rates, and just because if you've got a house or an apartment that you're letting full-time out for the same purposes that a hotel and a motel does, you have to have a level playing field, and the business rates have to apply to that online accommodation. We're excluding just letting a room out in your house. We're excluding altogether those that maybe only let their house for 4 weeks, but we're bringing in a graduated amount of business rate that you will have to pay if you are if you meet the other thresholds for acting as a business. And the same thing just also applies for online the online accommodation with targeted rates. If they're in the area that are covered by the targeted rate on accommodation, they'll pay the same. Now, some have expressed concerns about that, but I want to say this. I launched the report on Airbnb yesterday, and the Australasian Director of Public Policy for Airbnb congratulated me on this. He said, of course we should pay our fair share. He said that on Radio New Zealand yesterday. We expect to be treated like the other industries. We shouldn't be excluded. I also heard the hotel and motel industry on the radio last night saying, yes, that's a level playing field, we should do it. So when you consider the extension of the business rate and the targeted rate on accommodation to online accommodation, just keep in mind that both sides of industry support that. The Airbnb people themselves and the hotel and motel industry, to whom we made the commitment last year that they would have a level playing field with new forms of accommodation providers. And, you know, the number of people hosted by Airbnb last year grew by 114%. Airbnb is big and getting bigger, and of course they need to be treated fairly and equitably alongside other accommodation providers. The last point I want to make is on the Auckland Council Investment Limited, ACIL, and the proposal that that be disbanded. You're all aware of the feedback from the public on that, overwhelmingly in favour, but we're not doing this lightly. We have worked, it doesn't affect Auckland Airport Limited, Auckland International Airport Limited at all. Potentially it could affect the ports. I've had discussions with the ports, Liz Coots, the chair, and Tony Gibson, the chief executive. They have said to me that they support the proposal. It's not their, well, first of all, they say it's not their decision to make, it's ours. Are they worried about the proposal? No. They see more benefits than anything else in it, and they are absolutely satisfied with the memorandum of understanding that we've reached with them to protect the right of the ports to make commercial decisions independently from us. And they must have that right. It's their right, excuse me, under Section 5 of the Ports Act in any case. So they are relaxed about that. They also say there's a benefit here, we can work more closely together. ACIL tends to be an obstacle between council as the shareholder in the port and the ports company itself. There are areas where we can and should work together, collaboratively, cooperatively, and they welcome that. They think it'll make a difference for the positive. And of course it saves us $8 million, and I'm relying on that $8 million to cover the costs of a couple of the extra amendments that are coming through today, and some more besides. So councillors and members of the IMSB, I think this is really good. I think this is a great blueprint for the next 10 years. It will be altered in the annual plans each year as we find new things that we need and should do or can do better. But this actually is something that collectively we've worked on, and I think is something that will be welcomed overwhelmingly by our constituents. They've already demonstrated that in much of the consultation process that we've been through. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for your indulgence, and I commend this proposal to the Finance and Performance Committee.
Right, councillors, how we're going to deal with it today is we're going to have questions and comment, and we also then will vote accordingly at the appropriate time in blocks, and we're going to do A, B, C, D and E, so just so we're quite clear. So we are now actually just going to deal with questions and comments about A, which is A1 to A5. So in that spirit, I will take questions, but can I just give a heads up to councillors when it comes to the online accommodation targeted rate, all you are going to talk about is you're going to talk about what it says in the resolution there, which is to amend the rating system so that the business rates and accommodation provider move out to the Airbnb and book a batch. We are not here to discuss, and I will rule you out of order. There's a judicial review going on. There's no discussion on the accommodation targeted rate per se. You have the chance to do that at the next annual plan, which starts, needless to say, in about 3 months' time. So let's say we're quite clear there. We don't want to have any debate over that. And if we do, then I'll immediately get legal up, but it'd be nice if you actually just believe me and be aware of your responsibilities when it's under judicial review. So we have Councillor Fletcher, Casey and Walker at the moment. Questions? Councillor Fletcher.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't have your explanation as to how you were going to deal with this. So may I speak to a number of items, or you're wanting it specifically on A?
Yeah, no questions. We're going to stick to A, and then because they are the four meaty ones, because clearly A4 is, A3 is should not really require any discussion, because we are going to be transparent and accountable in the way we keep track of all our targeted rates. So really, it's talking about those four grunty items: 1, 2, 4, and 5.
Well, as I indicated to you yesterday, and I thank you for your clarification today, because there is a judicial review against the Auckland Council in the High Court, I will keep my comments brief. But in the interest of consistency, I wish to record my continuing opposition.
Question?
As I did, I thought it was questions and comments.
No, we'll do questions and then comments. Sorry, I didn't mean to mislead you there by thinking it was running together. No, we'll do questions, then we'll do comments.
No, well, I'll reserve.
Okay, you'll be first up when it comes to comments, Councillor Fletcher. So we then have Councillor Casey.
Not in that section.
No, Councillor Walker.
Sure. So I've got a question, and essentially it follows on from the comment that Councillor Fletcher was making. For those councillors who have an issue with the accommodation targeted rate in principle,
there will be no discussion.
Well, by all means no discussion, but I'm interested in having the opportunity to vote against it. Now, this is a long-term plan. In a long-term plan,
you will not have the ability, Councillor Walker, you will not have the ability to vote against the accommodation targeted rate. What you will have the ability to do is vote against the extension of it to book a batch and Airbnb.
Through you, Mr. Chair, is it possible for you to have some form of opinion on that?
Yep, right.
Because
that's
my
enough,
understanding
Councillor Walker. Councillor Walker, we will get Dana to come up, please.
May I just speak to that, Mr. Chair?
No, we're going to get ruling, and then hopefully you will just not speak about it, Councillor Walker, because you're actually going to get ruled out of order and soon. We're getting Daney is coming up, Councillor Walker.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I can just define the issue, then the officer may be better able to answer.
You may ask a question of the officer. Do you have a question, Councillor Walker?
Sure. So the question is, does the long-term plan process and our debate offer the opportunity for a councillor to vote against part of the long-term plan? That's just a generic question.
The issue through the chair is that a decision on the provision for the accommodation provider targeted rate in the LTP is not on the agenda today. That is because the council has not consulted on the provision of the accommodation provider targeted rate or the way that it would be assessed in the consultation document on the long-term plan. The Local Government Act is quite clear and it's quite prescriptive that we are required to specifically consult on any significant changes to the way the council intends to fund its operating or capital expenditure, including any changes to the rating system, and we need to do that through the consultation document. So when the council decided to go out to consultation, it only went out and consulted on this issue that's on the agenda today.
Having said that, we're voting in a long-term plan. It is a new long-term plan, and part of that long-term plan includes an accommodation targeted rate. I would have thought that I could...
Councillor Walker, look, you may lack in consistency at times, but you ain't stupid. Can't you please hear what legal has said to you about this? We cannot discuss this matter. You can talk about the extension of it for book a batch and for Airbnb.
I'm not interested in discussing it. I'm simply interested in recording my vote against the accommodation targeted rate through this long-term plan process, which I understand I can do, irrespective whether it's an item that's been consulted specifically on or not, because it is an implicit part of the long-term plan.
Banning.
Yes, that is correct through the chair. However, as I've said, there are essentially two decisions here. There is the decisions that you are considering today on the content of the long-term plan, and there is, of course, setting the rate. What's on the agenda today is a decision of whether to extend the rating treatment and by consequence the accommodation provider targeted rate on the online sector. So the only issue that we have gone out and consulted the public on is that issue, and the Local Government Act is quite clear that if we are going to make a change to the way we're going to fund our operating or capital expenditure, including a change to our rating system, we need to specifically consult on it and describe that potential change in the consultation document.
Okay, so just a question, Mr. Chair. So where is the accommodation targeted rate included, putting aside the extension to the Airbnb sector? So where is that included as an item that we're voting on today? Is it in B, for example?
So just going to let Matthew comment, Councillor Walker. It might just help clarify things for you.
Thank you, through the chair, and possibly Danny, for you just to pick up on. I want to be helpful here and differentiate between today's process and the adoption of the plan. The adoption of the plan will include the full rate strike across all of the rates. And so, Danny, in a way, the question might be today's agenda as opposed to the end of June's agenda, and the extent to which the end of June gives those councillors who are less keen on the accommodation provider targeted rate to register that at that point.
Through the chair, yes, I'd agree with that. There are two decisions. Today is a debate on the content of the long-term plan, including the funding impact statement, which provides for the accommodation provider targeted rate, and the decision later in June when that long-term plan is adopted, and then the rates are struck as a separate decision.
Just one question, Mr. Chair. So the draft budget referred to in B, so that's the budget for the final 10-year budget. Am I correct in saying that that draft budget includes an amount of an accommodation targeted rate?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
That's all I need to know, Mr. Chair. So as a consequence, I'll be exercising my right to vote against B. Thank you.
Right. And for Councillor Fletcher, just the answer about whether you want to register later, but you also have the opportunity clearly on June the 29th or whenever it comes back to also.
Yes, I'm loath to raise issues that I've already raised at a workshop, but it comes back to why officers did not give us further advice on the tiered targeting of this, the geographical targeting. So I'll just reserve my right to speak later if officers wish.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. I appreciate that. So, Councillor,
because exemptions don't seem fair.
We're on Councillor Hills with a question.
I have two questions that relate to the whole budget, so they're more holistic, not specific, but I'll try. Thank you, Chair. It's just a question for finance. So there's been a lot made about the 26 billion in capital, but could you just sort of verbally tell, I mean, it's there set out, but what is also the operating budget we're passing today? Do you know the approx figure over 10 years? So the 26 billion is the capital side, but the operating.
we don't have the exact number in front of us. It's about $4 billion a year in operating spend for the group. It increases over time, so across the 10 years, it's probably somewhere between $45 to $50 billion. We can come back with the exact number, but it's of that order.
And the other question I have is, there's been a lot made, and it sometimes gets made around here, around savings. We know we're making savings, considerable savings, but I think some people assume that a saving equals we'll drop our budget and have a discount on rates. But can you tell the room what happens when you make a saving, you know, with other projects moving into the gap, etc.?
So, through the chair, as savings are made, it's for the council to decide how you respond to that, whether those enduring savings could reduce the rates requirement, or they could be used to repay borrowings and enable further capital investment over time, or be used to be replaced.
So you're saying at the moment, to fund that $26 billion capital, we are also using, not only are we using rates, regional fuel tax and other things, but the savings we are making year on year, we're filling that gap with capital works.
Yes.
So to fund, basically, not to raise rates, we'd actually have to slow down our capital program to effectively show a reduction in our budget.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So just as a supplementary question to that, because that's a good question, so let's just say if we manage to get something taken off our balance sheet and parked away somewhere else, a big project, Central Interceptor, for example, what would that therefore mean to our overall program?
That would free up capacity and let us invest more in a bigger capital program.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Newman.
I had actually had a question for legal counsel, but has she gone?
She's down there.
Oh, hello. Behind Linda. Look, my question, arguments codified in the public agenda last year are a matter of record, so I really wanted to clarify, if I may, are those comments that were made last year in the public agenda able to be in any way restated, or can they not be restated simply because of a judicial review? Can you clarify that for me? Because I'm understanding that there's going to be a significant curtailing of debate. If the debate is to be curtailed simply because of a very narrow interpretation of what's relevant, fine. But if the debate is to be curtailed because matters stated in the public agenda last year could be perceived to be unhelpful to our position in relation to the judicial review now, can you clarify that?
Well, I think there are two reasons why the Chair is suggesting curtailment of the debate. The one is trying to confine it to the item on the agenda. In terms of the judicial review, the issue is that the reasonableness and fairness of the accommodation provider targeted rate itself is a question that is now before the High Court in the judicial review. So I'm encouraging the councillors to exercise caution about talking about that issue as it is now before the High Court.
I intend to vote for the proposition as set out in Roman numeral 5, because I think, you know, it's a debatable point, but you think if you're going to have the scheme that I don't support, you should have it as for a level playing field. But for people who do have concerns about the reasonableness of the principle of targeting property for the purpose of raising revenue, how do they transact that argument given what you have just said? Because it's a reasonable argument to state the reasonableness of the tax versus its perceived lack of fairness hitting one cohort of the tourism sector.
Well, look, I don't know, through the Chair, what you're wanting to say, but as I say, I just encourage the councillors to exercise caution about discussing in an open forum very questions that are at issue before the High Court.
Okay.
We'll have to deal with that later.
Mr. Chairman, as a point of order raised in terms of conflict, I'm just concerned because Councillor Hulse and I represent an organisation that owns assets in the accommodation sector. If we start straying into the substantive argument which was last year, that we will have to recuse ourselves, but it's getting very difficult to sort of find where we sit if we keep raising this. So I just would ask you to just be mindful of that for us, how far that goes, because we wouldn't know when to stay or go.
Well, basically, I'm trying to really reinforce exactly what our legal advice is, to be very cautious and just to not head there. And I think you'll notice that the Mayor, when he's actually talking about it, was very careful and was talking specifically only about Airbnb and the extension of it. He did not stray in any way into anything else.
I understand that. I'm just talking about...
I know, I understand. I'm trying hard, and I'm trying hard to really just encourage you to be cautious, please. That's why we have a legal team in-house and we seek legal advice externally to protect our position long-term. What more can I say? So I think there are no more questions of the first block of A. We will move to comments, and Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, well, thank you. In speaking to A, if I go back to my rather cynical comments when the Mayor introduced his proposal last year, I likened it to the Mayor having early Christmas presents in December, because there'd been a change of government and the transport possibilities were looking very much more rosy. But that would do him a disservice, because I want to really acknowledge today the investment that is being proposed in the environment, in our natural environment, which is very dear to me. And I ribbed former Mayor Brown that whilst we agreed on a lot of transport issues, he never gave us a green budget, he always gave us a brown budget. So today, I want to applaud the green budget initiatives that are there. They are long, long overdue, and yes, we have attended many a workshop, probably far, far too many workshops, and I have suggested to the Mayor's staff that we actually have a business case put to officers for having more workshops. But out of that have been some really good initiatives, and I do want to commend him on that. And I mean, there are other items that I want to commend him on as we go through, and I probably shouldn't speak to those right at the moment, and I'm assume we're going to get multiple speaking rights as we work our way through this agenda from A to B and so forth. Otherwise, I will touch on some of them now. Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at you and I'm just wanting to seek confirmation that we are just talking to those items on A, and we will have speaking rights. We're going to suspend standing orders for the purpose of multiple speaking rights for the budget debate today. Yes. So yes, I'm giving a big tick to that. I think targeted rates are the way to go in the natural environment, because they won't get filched into any other spending area, and so that advocacy that you have given us is very, very welcome. On the question of trying to curtail my comments or being gagged or whatever else, as I said to you yesterday, I'm going to be consistent, if nothing else, on the targeted accommodation rate. I can understand your justifications, but two wrongs don't make a right, and I just don't agree with it, because I don't think there's equity with it. So I'm going to leave my comments there and reserve my right to speak later in the debate. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Casey. Okay, Councillor Watson.
Thank you. So we're just speaking to A, if we want to, Mr. Chair.
Yep,
is that
A
it?
1 to 5. Yep.
Okay. I agree with the initiatives here and a desire to get some tangible results in a reasonable space of time. I just wanted to put on the record, Mr. Chair, because I think it's important that it be recorded here in open meeting, that in terms of both the targeted rate for water quality and the natural environment targeted rate, that the understanding is that there is going to be an equitable distribution across Auckland. This has been raised at a number of workshops and confirmed. I look at the targeted water quality rate, and obviously, a disproportionate part of it is going to the Western Isthmus. That's very clear. In the other subcategories of urban and rural streams and monitoring of on-site wastewater systems, I'm assuming that there's then a capacity to look at some of the other parts of Auckland that have requirements there, but who otherwise aren't really benefiting from the lion's share of the investment. Now, I think that's important because of the nature of these targeted rates. Targeted rates, by definition, go to provision of a service and a location. If you look at any of the old targeted rates and there were very few of them, I might add, of the super city, they were generally for a project and a given area which benefited a set number of people. This has changed that dynamic somewhat, so I know that certainly for myself, and I know a number of other councillors too, we've been at some pains to ensure that when officers go out to do this work program, they're looking to see that as much of Auckland as possible can benefit from that. And obviously in the cases then with the natural environment rate of Kauri dieback, there's an ample scope to do that. So while a lot of our attention has focused on the Waitakaris and also Hanua, clearly on the North Shore and in the Hibiscus Coast, there are significant strands of Kauri too that appear to be free from this scourge at the moment, but who you would hope would then be a priority in stopping it actually getting in there. So, without going on too much further, I'm just putting that on the record in public that our expectation is that there's a degree of equity here that goes right across the region, because that is the nature of the rate that we're gathering from our ratepayers. And I don't hear anyone disagreeing with that. Thank you.
And Councillor Watson, as you know, we've already seen a move in the Kaipatiki area to try and check that we don't have the spread of the Kauri dieback there, but the Kauri dieback is part of it. It's the targeted ecological protection is meant to be region-wide. Councillor Filipaina.
Filipaina, and thank you, Chair. I'm only going to speak to A bracket, A2. And just say, I agree with the comments being passed around the proposal, Your Worship. However, we've missed the boat in regards to what we could have done. And I remember previous finance and performance and also a governing body that followed, where there was a case that I wanted the option B, which was the option B of a presentation that we received a few months ago around what we could achieve with that particular targeted rate. And at the finance and performance, it was voted down. And then Councillor Fletcher ended up putting in, and I second another motion for that to be included in the consultative document. And Your Worship, I think we've missed the boat in regard to that one, solely and wholly as a result. If you have a look at, for those that I'm just going to refresh your memories, is that the percentage of high-value ecological areas and regional and community parks protected under that option, if it had gone out, was 100% community, 100% regional. What we're now getting is 30% community and 50% regional. We've missed the bus on that one. We've also missed the bus on percentage of rural mainland protected from possums. It could have been 100% to the committee, but now it's 28%. Also around the marine biosecurity management. There was an opportunity here for us to be proactive and not reactive. And, you know, I can go on and on through you, Chair, but I'm not. Because I've moved on from the fact that we didn't get that through to consult our community. And I say congratulations, Your Worship, on the option that we currently have. I know that it hasn't gone as far as we should have been, but at least it's something that we will work with. And the Chair mentioned that at annual plan and also in 3 years' time we have the opportunity to end up changing any of what's in what that could go into the long-term plan. But again, just to finish, I just believe that we've missed a very big opportunity to do a heck of a lot more if we had gone out to our community around that option B, what came to us a few months ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Tapu.
Tēnā koe te chairman, ka nui te mihi ki a koe te koromatu e tēnei rā, mō te kaupapa i tēnei LTP. Kia koutou i ngā mema o te kaunihira, tēnā koutou katoa. In terms of myself and my colleague, Connick, members of the Independent Māori Statutory Board, I refer my comments to Roman numeral 1 to 5, but actually I am going to generalise in terms of all, because I'm not going to say the same thing 10 times. Simply want to say first and foremost, we'll be supporting right throughout the recommendations, because the collaborative approach that has been undertaken through the Mayoral's office, through the officials, through the workshops, through the work that the Independent Māori Statutory Board has done, through the engagement with mana whenua and mātāwaka, we know that in all things that compromise and balance is required in order to service Auckland as a region. The Independent Māori Statutory Board is a regionally focused board, does have no wards or constituents, and has a belief that all should share in the opportunity across the region. So in some cases we see compromise, in some cases we see sacrifice. Always our concern is for those in lower socio-economic range where affordability of increased costs is such a burden to them. It doesn't take away the fact that it can be a burden to everybody, but at the same breath we have so many people requesting so many things, and as we see just in Roman numeral 1 to 5 alone. And of course, the board is involved in all the matters across the recommendations. So again, the board proposed a lot of investment proposals on top of the existing budgets that have been made available from the existing LTP. And again, we've had to reach compromise as well. We've been strong in support of the collaborative approach, not just within council, but across the CCO and the family group, in order to achieve those outcomes. So again, rather than go on specifically about things we might not like versus things we like, we've taken the approach that, through your worship and all those who have been involved, that we support this on the basis of balance, and that we look forward to continue as we have, and this is not our first one. This is, as we note, in a 10-year plan, there's always a 3-year review, and so along the way, things will change. What most important is that the reprioritisation of existing budgets and money that's made available is given to the effect to support Aucklanders as a whole. Myself in particular, I've been involved across other local government authorities throughout New Zealand, and there's no apples for apples in this country. So again, Your Worship, I'm not going to delay it, all members, but clearly been put that we will support these recommendations and right throughout, and we look forward to continue the work that we've been put in place to do by Parliament to assist Council to be the best Council in the world. So, Your Worship, we congratulate you for bringing this proposal to the table, and we look forward to the final deliberations.
Well, councillors, I suppose, given I have obviously allowed Member Taipere to have a more sweeping, in this case, endorsement of the overall package, I suppose if anyone else wants to signal that they want to make a sweeping endorsement or a sweeping objection, then I will allow that to happen. But otherwise, at the moment, we're still sticking to A 1 to 5. So we have Councillor Hulse.
Thank you. Mine is part sweeping, part sticking to 1 to 5. I just want to thank the Mayor most warmly and follow on from my extraordinary Deputy Chair of Environment and Community in thanking him for the 2 targeted rates, one for water, one for the environment. It's no secret that post-amalgamation in those first couple of budgets, and Councillor Fletcher is right. You know, we were so focused on the big building and the planning, and you know, some of us, I think my entire brain was taken up with the unitary plan. There wasn't much time for the environmental community. Then the Mayor handed Councillor Filipaina and I the Environment and Community Committee, and thanks to our colleagues around the table and to the extraordinary staff we work with, we've been able to sort of lift this up into a different place. And the 2 targeted rates, I think, just make that absolutely clear. So thank you warmly, Mr Mayor. 2 quick things on that. I think Councillor John Watson raises the issue that's in most people's minds. Through a targeted rate, what does that mean for local communities? And it's really clear to me that, particularly in the environment targeted rate, this is coming to a community near you soon, whether it be pest-free peninsulas, community weed days, or managing the complexities of increasing our biodiversity in our fragile communities. This is a region-wide thing, believe you me. The targeted water rate, yep, there's some really big pieces of kit that are going to be bought with this, but I doubt whether there's a single Aucklander who doesn't care about our harbours, and that's going to have a direct impact on our beloved Waitemata Harbour, and the rest of the targeted rate money will be spent community by community, looking to address our rural sewage issues, or you know, looking at the impacts of stormwater on the Kaipara. So, you know, these targeted rates are a brave move, but we thank the Mayor most warmly for treating the environment in the way that as Aucklanders we would expect the environment to be treated, and that is with respect and with investment, with acknowledging the fact that without environment there is no economy, Mr Mayor. So without the environment, the LTP would be pointless. And when we get to the next part, I hope to make the same point about the community side of our wonderful committee. Thank you.
Right, Wayne, sorry, Councillor Walker.
Sure. Certainly supportive of both of the targeted rates. Having said that, the concern I raise is that, especially in sensitive areas, and I'm referring to Long Bay Okura, where there is a massive sedimentation issue, that we have adequate funding addressed to deal with that. As it stands now, if you look at the projects, frankly, the funding in that area is absolutely minimal. So I put to you, Mr Chair, that there will be a need to readdress these projects over time, certainly given that this is a 10-year budget. So I just want to put that on the table, and I would just seek an assurance from officers that that is possible.
I think that's
just a yes.
So was that a yes?
Yes.
So silence is golden?
Okay. Effectively a yes, Councillor Walker.
Thank you.
Right, well, we have Councillor Newman.
Yeah, my comments relate to Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2. With respect to 2, actually, I haven't expressed much comment about this particular target rate over the last few months. I've talked about Kauri dieback and about the Rahui. I actually think that these activities ought to be funded as business as usual, if I'm honest, and that the idea of a target rate to be doing something different, good environmental stewardship ought to be delivered as an absolute matter of priority, and it shouldn't take a target rate for that. So I question frankly some of the focus here. We can control access to our magnificent kauri forests. Those kauri forests are easiest to control with respect to people who will always obey the rules about access or lack of access. If someone wants to drive up to the Waitakere Ranges, park their car, get out and walk into the forest, they can do so. If a feral pig wants to run through the Waitakere Ranges, that pig will do so. This is an easy target rate for people who play by the rules, and I think that if there is a cost centre around some of these activities, it should probably be addressed through business as usual, and if that's a priority, then there are other things that shouldn't happen instead. So I have a real problem actually with Roman numeral 2, as unpopular as that will make me with some people around this table. With respect to Roman numeral 1, Mr. Chair, I have had a long-standing concern about the water quality target rate and how it applies in an equitable way across the region. I've previously asked officers if the rate will do anything useful in terms of addressing water quality to reopen Weymouth Beach, and the answer that I got from the Healthy Water staff at that point was no. But the South's going to pay the water quality target rate, I'm sure, and I hope that the Waitemata Harbour will be the better for it, significantly better than is the case for many of the beaches on the Manukau Harbour. If the purpose of this target rate is to address issues in an absolutely regional basis, then urban stream projects identified by Healthy Waters with the local boards and funded through this target rate will be absolutely essential to ensure that all the communities of Auckland benefit from this. So, Your Worship, Mr. Chair, the last thing I'll say with respect to Roman numeral 5 is that whilst my position was stated last year, if you are to have a commercial provider accommodation rate, it does need to address the Airbnbs of this world. You do have to create a level playing field. That doesn't in itself address the substance of the issues that I raised last year, but if you are going to have it, it is going to have to be applied in a way which addresses that part of the online accommodation sector as well, as unpalatable as that may be for some. So I want to say that if my vote on Roman numeral 2, probably that's a no, but on Roman numeral 5, that is a yes, simply in order to create a level playing field.
Right, councillors, at the moment, before we have a vote, you've got a right to reply. We're going to do it in the block, so this will be block A. Are there any further comments? I'll just make a brief comment, just because we haven't actually talked about 4 at all, but councillors remember that in the feedback documentation there was, it's like asking, do you want to pay more taxes, do you want to pay more rates? We had negative support, not majority support, yet there clearly seems to be an appetite for the targeted rates going forward. We found that last year, or the last couple of years, with the transport targeted rate, but we seem to be getting quite good feedback, and people seem to like the identification of budgets and the ring fencing of the revenue to go, to be ring fenced and protected to go for what we say it's going to go on. So it seems as though it's something that maybe we're going to increasingly use it, but maybe not, but it certainly seems to be something that the public is warming to. Mayor Goff.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief in reply. just acknowledge the comments of councillors Fletcher and Holtz and Typeri and their broad support. Very much appreciate that. They're kind comments. The other comments I acknowledge as well, and just wanted to comment briefly on because they deserved a reply. Councillor Watson, I think what we want to do is make sure there's the same standard of environment right across the region. So it's a regional approach. But I would imagine that every part of the region will get some benefit out of these targeted rates because of, you know, pest control and areas like that, the polluted waterways. So I do foresee that over time every region will be brought up to the same high and acceptable standard, and that will benefit all. For Councillor Wayne Walker, your acknowledgement of the support for targeted rates, and really come back to Councillor Newman's comment on that.
I'm in big trouble now.
Why have targeted rates? I think there's two reasons. One, it does bring a real transparency around where you're spending the extra money. And everywhere I've gone around the region, including in your patch, people have said, hey, yeah, we like that because we think that when we have to pay a whole lot more in general rates, it's a bit of a big black hole and we don't know where it goes. What you've done is given us, yes, we want to do something about water quality, as you do. Yes, we want to do something about protecting the natural environment. And I think actually this has received really good support across the region. The second comment in that regard is I endorse your comments about A5, and I just want to make this point because I think I actually missed it the first time around. It is about the equity argument with Airbnb. By requiring Airbnb to pay business rates and the targeted rate on accommodation, that doesn't increase, certainly for the targeted rate on accommodation, doesn't increase the pool of rates, but the estimate from officials, I think, Andrew, it's your estimate, is that we can reduce the targeted rate on the traditional providers by up to 25%. So that's why, I mean, the Airbnb people are saying, yes, we support this because we want to pay our fair share, leastways their organisation is, maybe not every individual. A lot of individuals never want to pay any tax and contribute to anything. But the traditional providers are also saying, yes, we support this amendment. So if I just come back to Councillor Walker's point, voting against 5 would actually be voting against what both sides of the industry are actually asking for. This is not a vote on the targeted rate. That's not before us this year. It could be before us in another year if the councillor or councillors want to raise it. It is, as Councillor Newman has said, I think quite clearly, it's about equity and being fair to all sides, and that's why all sides are supporting it. Thank you.
Right, councillors, we're going to take A as a block, but we're noting that Councillor Fletcher wants to have it noted with 5 that you're against it, and we noticed that Councillor Newman wants on number 2 to have his name against it. Is there anyone else that wants to do that before we have the vote? Or? Right, so we have a mover and a seconder for A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I will put that. All those in favour? Aye. Against? And we note the 2 exceptions. So, right, well, we're going to have a brunch, a lunch break.
We'll have an Eggs Benedict.